In our next video, we will talk about color temperature. Color temperature uses analogous colors to lean each color towards the warm or the cool, and this will come into play when we begin shading an object. So for every color, there is a warm version and a cool version of that color. When we begin, we're using our same blending process. We can begin by putting a thin layer of our main color, so red in this case, across the entire rectangle. Then I'm going to add my warm and my cool colors. So, for my red-orange, I will start adding orange on top. Now remember, the whole goal of this assignment is not only to mix your colors, which I know you can do from your color wheel, but also to work on blending and transitions. So I don't want to see a hard line where my red-orange stops and my red begins. I want them to slowly fade into one another. So as I move closer to the red, I'm going to use less pressure on my pencil, so that as I get even closer, gravity starts to do all of the work, and I'm not pushing at all with my hand. And I want it to be much heavier on the warm end. Then I'll come to my cool side. I'll use my violet to create red-violet. Just as before, I can use a heavier pressure, still not enough to make it waxy, but a heavier pressure on this end, and as I move in closer to my pure red, I'm going to lighten my pressure so that gravity is doing all of the work. It's always good to kind of squint your eyes at your drawing to see if things are really blending and transitioning well. After I've added these layers, I need to finish my sandwich. So I need to put a lid on it by adding more of my local color on top. And I'm going to add more to my pure area as well because I want it to be the same consistency so that it has a uniform look. And it's really important to make sure that this is really red-violet and not just violet. So I got to make sure that I really see a little bit of that red coming through. All the way to the edges. After I've done that, I use my colorless blender. So I make sure that the point of my blender is clean by scribbling on another piece of paper. And then I start with some pressure blending. Now I still want to try my best to use that circular motion to avoid seeing any scratchy marks. Because if I just go back and forth like this, I'll be able to see the grain of my pencil marks. And I want it to be as smooth as it can be. So now I can see that I have a solid red that starts to lean more warm on this side and more cool on this side. In this area right here, it's a little bit of a harsh line. I'd like to see that blend a little bit more. So I might just lightly graze across that area to try to make that a little bit more of a smooth transition. So next I will do my yellow. So I will start with my yellow colored pencil and I'm going to go across the whole rectangle with a thin layer. Next, I'm going to add a thin layer to my warm side, so I have yellow-orange, and a little bit to my cool side with yellow-green. Now, again, yellow is a very temperamental color, okay? You don't want to overpower it. So I'm going to go very lightly with my orange. And as I move towards the middle, I'm barely grazing the surface. In fact, you might not even be able to see anything on the video because that's that subtle. And then I can add a little bit more towards the end so that I have a more pure color down here, and then it softly transitions in the middle. On this side, I'm going to use my green. Now, in your pack of Prismacolors, you're going to find two greens. You'll find an apple green and a grass green. It's up to you which one you want to use. You want to decide which is going to be the most beneficial to whatever it is I'm coloring. If I were adding green to blue, I might choose the darker green because blue is a much stronger color that needs a little more pigment to change. However, my yellow is really, really weak and it's going to change much more easily. So I'm going to choose my apple green for my yellow because it's much closer to what I'm trying to do. And the more you are comfortable with blending your Prismacolors, the more you will see and feel confident in choosing different variations of the same color. So as I move towards the center, again, I'm going to really lighten my touch so that I'm barely grazing the surface. And even on the ends, I'm not really pressing very hard at all. So then I'm going to sandwich it together with more yellow. I'm going to squint my eyes at it to make sure that I have a smooth transition. And then I'm going to start blending. Now again, always check your blender. It would be really bad news to put this down and get a big streak of red in my yellow. So just scribble on a scrap of paper to kind of clean it up. And now I have my yellow, a little bit of warm, and a little bit of cool. Next we'll do blue. Again, I start the same way with a thin layer of blue across the whole rectangle. Then I'm going to add a little bit of my warm and a little bit of my cool. It's really important on the blue to take note that our warm version is blue-green and our cool version is blue-violet. Both of these colors can be considered cool colors. But when you are shading an object, you want to use blue-green for your lighter colors and blue-violet in the darker areas. So for this blue, I'll use the grass green. However, if you only have apple green, it will do as well. Heavier pressure on the end. Still not enough to be waxy. And then I lighten my pressure as I move in toward the pure blue. And notice on all of these, I've left myself a good distance of space of pure color. So don't go in too far so that you only have a teensy little sliver of your pure color. And in my cool areas, I use some violet. And actually, when you're shading like this, you really don't want to have a super sharp tip. You kind of want a dull tip because you can get a much smoother layer. If you have a very pointy tip, you're more likely to see your individual marks. So I'll begin to sandwich with more blue. It's very tempting to stop using the small circles, but you do want to try to continue with them as much as you can. It will give you a much better result. And then I blend. Even when I start to use a more back and forth motion, I still try to make it an oval or an ellipse rather than straight, harsh marks. So now I've done the 3 primary colors and created a warm and cool version for each. Continue using the same method for your secondary colors, for green, for violet, and for orange. Remembering that orange is a much weaker color and requires less of your tertiary colors to change it.